Alright guys, time to give my opinion on that recent, I guess it's called Guilty Gear Strive now. I guess it's called Strive because they're trying to say it's the fourth one, main series, but technically there was XX, or there was Guilty Gear, the X series. Then I guess Isco was technically very different, right? Then Xrd, so then Strive would actually be five, right? Are they just not counting that? I don't know. Whatever, dude. So Guilty Gear Strive, and I want to talk about, and I've given this example before, of why the dust loop. This is actually probably a better title for it because it makes it sound more epic. Why the dust loop saved Guilty Gear. I've given this example before, and I'm giving it because when I've talked about the goodwill in Guilty Gear, because one of the things I'm worried about the new game is I'm worried about the goodwill in the new Guilty Gear 2020 Guilty Gear Strive, right? So what do I think about the new footage? I really don't think there's much to say because besides what I've already said, I never thought there wasn't going to be any combos. I mean, it still looks like there's combos. You know what I mean? I can't appreciate when people say there's not going to be like any Oki, which I fucking hate that word, but whenever the community uses it, so it does roll off the tongue easy, right? Oki, whatever. You know what I mean? I just say wake up stuff. Whatever. I mean, if every attack has to knock the guy down and there's like a set distance that they have to roll back. I don't see why anyone would ever think that there's not going to be like any kind of wake up game kind of stuff, right? I mean, geez, because technically any kind of air combo that you end, right? If the guy's always has to go a set distance when they knock back and they fall down, unless they change the game to where there's going to be a way that the guy gets knocked and then they roll forward or something like that. There's just no reason. Like some of the stuff the community complains about when they first saw the game doesn't make any sense to me. Like I can't appreciate when people are like, oh, there's not going to be any OK in the game. Like why? It definitely looks like there's going to be. I mean, you know what I mean? Just like I can't appreciate that there wasn't going to be any combos. I mean, it certainly looks like there's going to be combos and all this other stuff. You know what I mean? And even like say when you're looking at some like the wall combos, right? You saw some guys, or I saw some people like the wall kind of cracks a little bit, but then there's still attacks where even after it cracks the wall a bit, the guy rolls forward, they bounce off the wall, right? So I was even thinking, man, I mean, there's probably gonna be some crazy combo videos because again, there's no teching technically, right? Mid-screen teching technically, right? I'm so fucking, my English is amazing, right? Shakespeare mode. So say you do a huge middle screen combo, right? The guy can't tech. You get them to the corner, right? Imagine you bounce them all off the wall a few times before the wall cracks. Then you do your move that makes the guy hit the wall, but then they bounce off. So then, since you can off the ground the guy, imagine you do that with a jump cancelable move. Then you jump over the guy since they bounced on the wall. You OTG them to an attack, and then you start doing a middle screen combo again. Not like they can tech. I don't know if you guys are getting what I'm getting at, but I could probably Dragon Ball Z the game and just Guilty Gear, like, you know what I mean? Like I said, there's so many games that said exactly how they're going to work. Give me a little bit more footage, and I'm sure I could probably tell you how the game's going to work already. You know what I mean? Everything seems pretty obvious to me. My problem with the game is what I said before. I'm worried about the goodwill in the game. I think the corner stuff is potentially interesting, but right now, as it seems, I'm worried the corner stuff was just put in there so that everyone can feel like they're doing a combo. Because no matter what you mash, you're going to get a combo technically, right? That's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about that the corner stuff wasn't put there in good faith and in goodwill. I'm worried that it was also put in there to make people feel like they're doing something. And that part like scares me. Like that's what scares. Like wow, maybe they just put that in there like because like again the corner stuff could have been like a whole new idea, right? And I'm still sure there's still stuff to it, right? But say the fact that supers automatically break the wall, that's fucking stupid. That doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm worried that again, maybe it was just put in there so people can feel like they're mashing and doing something because everything's going to work, and that's the part that worries me, right? You know what I mean? And of course, like other goodwill stuff, again, the block damage stuff, how they changed that is not goodwill. That's terrible. They need to get rid of that. You know what I mean? They need to make sure that block damage can kill you. FD, needs to have a purpose. Being able to block DPs in the air, that's fucking terrible. That's not a goodwill change. That is fucking terrible game design right there, dude, right? I'm not worried about the combos. I'm not worried about the game, how it seems like it's drastically different. I'm worried about the fundamental aspects of what make a fighting game good, right? That's what worries me. I mean, again, even if the game is more Street Fighter, that doesn't technically. bother me per se. If it's a Guilty Gear in a Street Fighter kind of way, doesn't technically bother me. You know what I mean? But one argument I forgot to give in the last one is remember, oh god, well Street Fighter now they're getting rid of close normals. That's fucking terrible, but right? But remember in Street Fighter, there's more buttons. Guilty Gear actually has less buttons, right? We only have one close normal in Guilty Gear. In Street Fighter before Street Fighter 5 fiasco, you know what I mean? We had close up normals too. So even if there was less maybe subsystems we could call it. We had more normals, right? So Guilty Gear is, you know what, making Guilty Gear more Street Fighter, but remember, there's certain aspects of Guilty Gear that are not necessarily as complicated as Street Fighter. There's not even as many buttons, dude, right? You know what I mean? So little things like that worry me because Guilty Gear before was a game and the way that it flowed and the way that it tap, you know what I mean? Guilty Gear was a game that there are times when you play Guilty Gear and you're like, wow, this game feels really good. How you like tap and stagger pressure and all that kind of stuff, right? So, you know, there's a lot of fundamental aspects of the new Guilty Gear that I'm potentially worried about. I'm not worried about a lot of the other stuff people are complaining about doesn't actually, I can't appreciate what people are complaining about. But, you know, most people don't know what they're talking about when they talk about video games anyway. So maybe that's normal, right? Um, yeah, so like I said, I'm worried about a lot of fundamental things. Not going to keep talking about that. But remember, when I talk about the goodwill in Guilty Gear, and I've given this example before, and you have to be able to think about what I'm saying. I talk about the goodwill because Guilty Gear is a game that you could still appreciate what made fighting games popular in the first place, right? Maybe you don't like old school Street Fighter, but fundamentally, there's always going to be a part of Street Fighter in every game, right? Because for lesser or worse, right? You know what I mean? Lesser, better or worse, and less and sometimes more sometimes less, right? But there's an idea of what made fighting games fun to the general public and what caught Street Fighter on, right? Some fundamental aspects of that you could appreciate from Street Fighter, right? And you could still see some of that in Guilty Gear, right? And I've given this example before, and I'm gonna label this now as how the dust loop saved Guilty Gear, right? Because if you think about Guilty Gear before, Guilty Gear did not actually take off with the quotation mark masses, perhaps, of the fighting game community until XX, right? And you think, why didn't it? And why did it, right? Well, before that, remember you think about, well, Guilty Gear, the first one was a clusterfuck, right? But it had its own vibe, so it warranted a sequel, right? It had its own vibe. Then X, you know what I mean? You had all the FGC, Infinites, everything like that. You know what I mean? So maybe a casual person like, oh, this game's kind of wacky. You know what I mean? It looks really cool, but man, all this FDC infinites, you know what I mean? You got Johnny mistrapping you. You know, whatever you thought was the problem of X, right? Maybe a casual fighting game fan couldn't appreciate what was going on because it actually looked too complicated, perhaps. But think about XX. XX is when Guilty Gear finally caught on with the masses, right? Quotation marks, masses of the fighting game community. And remember, I've been in fighting games a long time, right? You know what I mean? A lot of people didn't like Guilty Gear at first. They're like, oh, it's just an anime game. Again, because they couldn't appreciate it at first. They couldn't appreciate what was going on. So you think, why did XX catch on? Why did the dust loop actually save Guilty Gear? Well, think about Street Fighter. A common aspect of old school Street Fighter, when fighting games were the most popular they've ever been, when fighting games were not only the most popular fighting game, when Street Fighter was not only the most popular fighting game, when Street Fighter was one of the most popular video games ever. When was it again, this isn't that Street Fighter isn't complicated, because again, Street Fighter is more complicated than other games in some sense, old school. Think about some fundamental ideas that you can look at and appreciate Street Fighter. And I talked about this before. Some people don't like it, but it is what it is. Fireballs, dragon punches. Look at mix-ups like, hey, is a character going to walk up, throw you in Street Fighter, or is a character going to walk up, dragon punch you? In such a simple thing can have such a huge influence on the match. Anyone can appreciate that. Like, boy, this he's just doing fireballs and dragon punches, and man, that DP hurt you so much. And maybe someone's like, oh god, he's just DPing the whole time, and then randomly he'll throw me sometimes, and it does so much damage. It has so much influence over the match. Anyone can appreciate this. They can look at this like, wow, maybe you appreciate it in a negative way. You're like, I can see what's going on, and it's too powerful. Maybe you're not a Jimmy, and you're like, okay, that is what it is, right? But think about when XX got popular. why did XX get popular? What was an easy way that XX taught people what was going on in the game? And it was the dust loop, dude, right? What's going on with the dust loop? Soul is either going to DP you, then RC you to the dust loop, huge damage, or is going to the mix up, do the wild throw into dust loop. Both do a huge amount of damage, and both teach the player and the audience what is going on. It's very easily digestible, also while teaching the person how Guilty Gear works. So if he DPs, you got the DP. Every person that understands fighting games, until they're trying their best to get rid of DPs, but you can see DP and you're like, oh, that's an invincible move, and if you try to attack, the dude gets hit, or whatever, and they can't beat it, right? Or you know what I mean, right? And like, oh, so, but you teach the person because either you RC it, which is teaching you about Guilty Gear, then you run in, you do kick, duck, hard slash. So like, oh, so then you're teaching the person a chain combo. Then you jump up, and so you do a dust into dust. So you're like, wait, so instantly you've taught the casual person, maybe the Street Fighter person who didn't like Guilty Gear, they're like, oh, wait a second, I can appreciate this idea of Street Fighter and Guilty Gear now. The DP throw mix-up has such a huge influence on the match. And I'm also learning the game while I do it. I've learned about the RC mechanic. I'm doing these chain combos. I just did a chain combo. I hate chain combos. Fucking hate chain combos, but I did kick, duck, hard slash. Then I did a jump cancel. I'm like, okay, I did a jump cancel. And then I do the dust. Dust. And you're like, oh, dust is a link from a Street Fighter thing like this. So it's like, oh, I can't just mash it. I have to link it. I have to use a little bit of skill like Street Fighter. I have to link combos like Street Fighter. So you're like, oh, fuck. You're like, okay. So I'm learning a little bit about this game while still appreciating Street Fighter. You do the next time you do wild throw, so I'm like, oh, the throw mix up. So I can't just throw into knee dash, maybe if I'm can, or just some regular throw, whatever you're doing. You're like, oh, I got to throw, and then I got to do this link combo. And you're like, okay, I understand. And people got hyped for that shit because as much as people say they don't like it, they're like, oh, random DPs are just doing, I hate this bullshit, whatever the case. But you're like, oh, wait a second. I can see the progression of Street Fighter in Guilty Gear, and it made people want to give Guilty Gear a chance. People don't get that. Like, again, you can appreciate the Street Fighter, and so they started playing Guilty Gear, and they're like, wow, Guilty Gear actually has a lot of goodwill in it. A lot of the systems, you know what I mean? They're here for the better, right? Not everything. Like some of Guilty Gear is a serendipitous game. There are some things that happen serendipitously, right? And you know what I mean? They just happen to be better. Like Guilty Gear is an amazing game in terms of, boy, so many bugs in Guilty Gear make the game infinitely more interesting. Very, very crazy how that worked out. But maybe some games are a little bit serendipitous, right? So hopefully you get what I'm getting at, right? You could see some of the Street Fighter and Guilty Gear, and there's other aspects too. But you could see as many people are like, oh, I'm against Guilty Gear because of how this works, because of how this works. But they're like, you know what? I can see a little bit of what made fighting games originally popular. Okay. And that's what I'm worried about for the new Guilty Gear. I'm worried, you know what I mean, that some of the fundamental aspects that should be in all fighting games, right, are not going to work correctly. You shouldn't be able to block a DP in the air. You know what I mean? You shouldn't be able to do that. There's like a fundamental brain malfunction you're having if you think that's how it should work, right? So those are the things I'm kind of worried about. You know what I mean? Even Guilty Gear, like think about, I was talking about how there's less buttons. Guilty Gear is also a game that, generally speaking, there's not like different level strengths of like special move buttons. So if the game is going a little bit more Street Fighter, when you don't have different strength special moves all the time, that worries me a little bit too. But like I said, in general, the new Guilty Gear, I'm not worried about what a lot of people are saying. I'm sure there's going to be combos. I'm worried that they might be just an excuse to make someone feel like they're doing something. I'm sure there's going to be complicated ones, but I'm worried that it's not totally done in goodwill. You know what I mean? Some of the changes I'm worried, again, I don't know if they come from a place of love. I wonder if they come from a place of, please, Jimmy, buy my game, stop complaining, right? Those are the things I'm kind of worried about. I guess the game isn't coming out till the end of next year, though, so that's quite a while. I guess that does give me a little bit more hope that there will be a little bit of fundamental changes. But again, I don't expect the idea of the game to change. People are like, oh, it's too drastically different. I don't expect there to be a drastic change in the idea of the game. I don't think there's any reason to think that still, right? some random things can change. Like I hope, the whole black damage thing, FD thing, you know what I mean? Characters being fiddled with here and there. I can see that kind of stuff changing, right? But the idea of it being a drastically different Guilty Gear that people are complaining about, I don't see why people would think that would change because there's what, why would you show off a brand new game like, hey, this game is brand new, it's drastically different. Tell us how you hate it so we can start over from scratch again. Generally not how games work. They probably have an idea of what they're going with. You know what I mean? So anyway, the end.